Alrighty, welcome everyone to 2021 AWS reInvent recap from the AC3 crew. I'd just like to take this opportunity to talk to you about some of the people who are joining us today. So we've got myself. I'm Greg Cockburn, head of Hyperscale Cloud here at AC3. We've got Stephen Tan. Say hi, Stephen. He's a senior Hyperscale Platforms Engineer with us. And we've got Geethika. Say hi, Geethika. He's a solutions architect in New Zealand with us. And we've got Simon. There he is, a solution architect in our Melbourne office. Some of the topics we're going to cover off today. I'm going to run through some Graviton updates, one of my favorite topics. Stephen's going to talk to us a little bit about some of the CDK and developer tools that got released. Geethika's going to share with us some RDS updates. And finally, Simon's going to tell us a little bit about enterprise data protection. So if you give me a second, I'll just get the video started and we will kick off. In 2015, Amazon acquires Annapurna Labs. And then at reInvent 2018, released the first generation Graviton processor under the instance pseudonym A1. These did so well that a year later, AWS at reInvent 2019 announces the release of the Graviton 2, the second generation Graviton processor, using the G suffix on the instance type, like T4G and M6G. After this, we started to see other services such as RDS supporting Graviton 2. Then in early 2021, we had the Graviton Migration Challenge, AWS code build support for Graviton 2, and a number of excellent blog posts. And I might be a little bit biased here as I wrote one, comparing Graviton 2 to Intel and AMD processors. I personally found that the claims of a 40% price performance improvement were holding true. Then as we started to get towards reInvent 2021, the really cool announcements started to happen. Graviton support for Lambda. This was a really exciting announcement, but I still wanted to know when I could deploy containers on Graviton via Fargate. And just before reInvent, my pleas were answered. Graviton 2 support for Fargate. Woohoo! It's now possible to run a large-scale application completely on Graviton with very little infrastructure management from RDS, Lambda, and Fargate, and build it all on code build. I expect that we'll see more services supported in the future. At Adam Selipsky's first reInvent keynote, he did not disappoint on the Graviton front. He announced the third generation Graviton processor, Graviton 3. This chip is expected to be 25% faster than Graviton 2, 2 times faster for floating point operations, and 3 times faster for machine learning workloads. It's also expected to be better for the environment using 60% less power. The new instances, which will have the prefix C7G, will also use DDR5 memory, which has 50% more bandwidth and a reduction in power use over DDR4. With all the buzz in the industry around ARM-based processors, I can't wait to see what the future holds. Thanks.
Hi all, my name is Stephen Tan and I'm a Senior Hyperscale Platforms Engineer here at AC3. Today, I will be talking to you about the newly released developer tools that AWS have announced during reInvent. These services and tools are largely aimed at improving the quality of life for developers when building new applications and deploying them onto AWS. Firstly, I will go into one of my favorite announcements, which is CDK v2. CDK is an open source development framework, allowing developers to define their cloud resources using popular programming languages. such as Python, TypeScript, C#, Go, and Java. Between V1 and V2, there have been major changes in the way dependency management is handled. With V1, you will need to install each resource individually: EC2, autoscaling, SQS, CloudFront, etc., making it complicated to set up a project from scratch. With V2, all constructs are now included as part of the AWS CDK library, simplifying dependency management and IDE code completion. Another change is that in CDK V2, AWS will no longer make breaking changes to any APIs in minor version releases. And instead, there will be a separate set of libraries that you can use to install experimental constructs. This means that every method, class, and property in the AWS CDK library is guaranteed to exist until the next major version update. This is an improvement from V1, as experimental libraries have the same naming convention as stable libraries, causing some confusion and instability when using them without double-checking each individual library. CDK V1 will be fully supported up until June 1st, 2022, and then it will enter the maintenance phase. During this phase, CDK V1 will only receive critical bug fixes and security patches. This will last for 1 year, and then on June 1st, 2023, support for CDK V1 will end entirely. For most CDK code bases, you will be able to upgrade to V2 without encountering any issues. Though running a CDK's diff is a recommended step for testing the upgrade, as you may need to use CDK feature flags, which is configured in your cdk.json file, to fall back to older behavior. This will likely not be a result of upgrading from V1 to V2, but actually upgrading from an older version of CDK V1 to V2. To complement CDK V2, AWS have also released a new website called Constructs Hub. It is a single home where the open source community, AWS, and cloud partners can share and discover construct libraries for all CDKs: CDK for Kubernetes, CDK for Terraform, and CDK. Since its announcement, over 800 construct libraries have already been submitted to help improve your experience and speed up development when using CDK. To make a submission, you will need to do this via the NPM registry, where you can tag your library with a keyword recognized by Construct Hub. This means that any construct you open source will be indexed and searchable very quickly. To add other programming languages, these need to be converted by JSII and submitted to the other repositories. For example, your Python packages will need to go to Python packaging index. With this, you will easily be able to search for constructs that fulfill your specific need, language, and even CDK version. To get started, just visit constructs.dev and you'll be able to search through the hundreds of constructs that are already open sourced. On the application side of things, AWS have released a new service called Amplify Studio that helps speed up the initial development of applications on AWS. Amplify Studio is an extension to the pre-existing Amplify CLI that offers a visual development environment to accelerate your UI development with minimal coding. You can now use Amplify Studio to rapidly deploy a working MVP or proof of concept. Amplify Studio allows you to intuitively set up a brand new project and connect it to AWS services for your backend. This includes things like data modeling to define how your data is accessed and stored, and configurable features like authentication, GraphQL APIs, file storage in S3, and more. To further simplify the development process, Figma files can be imported into Amplify Studio to customize your UI and bind these components to data from the application backend. Amplify Studio will then be able to export all front-end and back-end artifacts to usable code: JavaScript for your application code, Amplify CLI, and AWS CDK for extending back-end infrastructure. Lastly, AWS have also released developer previews for SDKs in 3 different programming languages: Kotlin, Swift, and Rust. You can now use these SDKs to interact with AWS natively from your applications using AWS maintained libraries that follow the language idioms and best practices. Thank you for listening. I hope you have learned about something new that you can use.
Hi, I'm Geethika and I work as a solutions architect at AC3. Recently, I've been helping some of our customers to migrate and also optimize their database solutions in AWS. With that context, I found a couple of announcements at this year's reInvent quite interesting. One of that is the RDS custom for MS SQL Server. To be honest, this is not entirely new. AWS introduced RDS custom for Oracle databases a few months ago, but then again, no one uses Oracle these days. So what is really RDS custom? It is a hybrid between a true RDS where the customer does not have direct access to the underlying OS, and on the other hand, running a database on EC2 server, where every detail of database management is customer's responsibility. So quite simply, RDS custom allows full privilege access to the underlying operating system. In this diagram here, on a traditional RDS sense, the user would create a database instance, which is shown in number 1. And the user will only have access to the database via the instance endpoints, shown in number 3. But with RDS custom, the user will have access to the host OS, where you can customize your software, which is shown in number 2 here. So with RDS custom, AWS essentially removes another set of barriers which used to stop customers from migrating their SQL Server workloads into RDS. I've listed a few items in this slide, but the overall idea is any SQL Server workload you could not migrate to RDS due to lack of access to the underlying OS can now be migrated to RDS and let AWS do the heavy lifting of the infrastructure management. So this will help you migrate any legacy or custom applications which you needed access to the underlying OS environment. Now you can pull to RDS and still have that access, and also let AWS manage the underlying infrastructure. So the next item is essentially DevOps Guru for RDS. And with continuing the theme of this year's reInvent, this is also an incremental change where a new capability is added to DevOps Guru service. What this essentially does is using machine learning to automatically identify things like overutilization of resources, database bottlenecks, and misbehaving SQL queries. And also it recommends solutions to remediate these issues. So if you look at DevOps Guru console, you'd see that what it essentially does is anomaly detection on DB load metrics. And given the DB load metric measures the level of activity in the database, this is a great metric to understand the health of your database. And what it also gives is the cause of the problem. So it analyzes the metric and gives you the potential cause of the problem you're facing, and also some recommendations to fix it. So the best part of this capability is that you don't need to be a database or machine learning expert to use this to troubleshoot and fix your database performance issues. And that's me. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. The recent AWS reInvent conference covered a lot of contents. As we all know, they provide great opportunities for finding out what's happening, what are the things going to actually being introduced, and also the best practices. I have found a number of areas that are very interesting. Now, one that I always feel strong about is the topic of enterprise data protection, which is an absolute integral part of any enterprise security architecture or security operations. Now, because of the cloud era, a lot of data right now actually resides in the cloud environment, as we all know. In the enterprise, the common scenario is that because of the complexity and the structure, i.e. the existence of a number of different business units, and there are a lot of, or at least multiple AWS accounts. And in each AWS account, there are some different resources, and they can all have different behaviors. For example, one workload in one account may behave differently to another workload in a different account, even though they are all part of the same enterprise. Why they behave differently? It is something like how the data is processed, is stored, and is accessed. So maybe in one scenario, the data on an S3 bucket can be accessed very frequently by a lot of the different people, even the public. While in a different environment, maybe there is another confidential or secret S3 bucket that is only accessible, or at least expected to be accessible only for a handful of users. So they are all different. We'll start with what I guess typically is being done, and obviously what you are doing are the things like, as suggested by AWS best practices. You use Security Hub, you use Control Tower, you use organizations, you use service control policies to define a good security posture and control and maintain the so-called least privilege access. But things are changing. There are always dynamics, and there are always threats, i.e., people or services try to gain unintended access to some enterprise data. Typically right now, we use policies. We use long-term access control. So in IAM, you have the so-called long-term access, which is user credential-based. And then you also, you're also advised to use short-term access methods, such as the use of role-based. So we use STS, we use federation, we use SSO, these methods to maintain and control temporary access. And we use role-based access control and session policy to basically manage and control the access to some resources, to some data. But what's interesting here is that because of the advancement of the things like data analytics and machine learning, actually you can do more, and you can do more intelligently to the idea of data protection. So here is the concepts. While we are all doing all these access, we are actually collecting a lot of security data or security usage data. So such data is generated from the likes of logging services, monitoring services, and CloudTrail, CloudWatch, and others, even third-party systems, the security systems. They all generate extensive volume of so-called security data. And we can use analytic tools and machine learning tools now to process such data. And I'm talking about the likes of Kinesis, OpenSearch, EMR, used to be called Elastic MapReduce, SageMaker, these services, AWS services, right? So they can actually manage and analyze the data flows coming in. In this case, the subject topic here is security data, right? So we can process and inject the security data and process them. And what we can achieve here is that we structure the flow in such a way that we can respond to real-time data processing. Many people have talked about things like MSK, so Managed Apache Kafka, and KDA, Kinesis Data Analytics. These are the specific tools together, And there are also some third-party, so open source tools we can use to inject data, right? Such as Provola. With all these together, what we can achieve are things like we can actually let the analytics to develop and to model what are the normal behaviors of a workload, of the data generated of the workload, and what are the outliers or abnormal behaviors of such data. What are the benefits then? Well, that can be very interesting. You may be able to realize the so-called real-time response to threats. So as long as the threats are well defined and the analytics and machine learning tools are used properly, you can actually, in a real-time response and eliminate that a threat that is going to happen, or that is happening, or that is underway before it is too late. But now, with all the intelligence we have discussed, we are speculating a very nice or better outcome in this case, which is that you can stop the access, the illegal access, unintended access to this S3 bucket, but at the same time maintaining the normal operation so the business actually can continue on with this. So these are just a few things that can be done by combining the power of the existing large volume of security monitoring and security logging data and the power of data analytics and machine learning. Another thing is that everything can be customized, or everything is customized. So not only that every organization, every account's security behavior can be different, and the policies and best practices can also be different. So even best practices, or what are the most suitable security approach to a certain environment, to an enterprise account, or to an environment, can also be different. But again, overall, I believe the data analytics and machine learning technologies together are making and are going to continue to make enterprise data security more and more exciting and more solid for every organization to consider to use. So I strongly recommend organizations or enterprises that do have strong interest in data protection to look into these areas and these new emerging technologies and see where applicable to work together with the cloud partners, service providers and partners to develop some more evolutionary or innovative approach to better manage and protect your enterprise data. Thanks.
Cool. Thanks, everybody. If Patrick, if Geethika, Simon, and Stephen wouldn't mind joining me back, and we'll just take this moment now. If you have a question, feel free to ask it either in the chat or raise your hand, and I'm happy to take you off mute and you can ask your question. Maybe I'll get started with one. Geethika, RDS Guru, is that available now?
Yes, it is.
And can it's available in every region, or
it is available in Sydney.
Yay!
So that's a start, and
cool.
And also you don't have to pay extra for that. So it is, you of course have to pay for any remediations or any implementation of recommendations you do, but you don't have to pay extra to do this analytics.
Okay, so is it in CloudWatch or is it in the RDS console?
It's in RDS console.
Okay, so is it something to adjunct to the the performance insights tools that already exist?
Yes.
Okay. Did you use it in anger for that screenshot?
No, I just borrowed the screenshot from somewhere.
All right. You need to give us an update the next time you get to use it in anger. All right, cool. I believe we do have a question from somebody. Just give me a second. Wing, you should be able to unmute.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
Hi. So I'm just wondering about the ARM CPU instances, because according to Apple and some other vendors like Amazon, AWS, they have deployed some ARM instances for the public, right? How's the performance of that in terms of cost and also the, say, with the same settings in Python, let's say, what is the advantage or what are the benefits of using an ARM CPU in AWS?
Yeah, good question.
Yeah.
Sorry. Was there more to that question?
Yeah, because right now I am still developing in a x86 environment, but I believe that the trend is pointing to the ARM way instead of the x86 or x64 way. So yep. I'm just wondering, are there any fact sheets or data publicly available for the developers or for the system architects to plan for their next generation infrastructure?
Yeah, good question. So I think there was about 3 or 4 questions in there. So let's kind of try and pull them to pieces. So first off, is there some information? So there's a lot of information that AWS has, and I know a number of people have written blog posts, myself included, and some other ambassadors. If you're using an interpreted language like PHP, Python, Ruby, even Java, things like that, for the most part, 99.999%, you're going to have no particular issues. You may hit something weird in a particular shared object that might require something of an x86-64 processor, but I would suspect that for most workloads, you're going to have no particular issue. In terms of, so if you're doing anything with a compiled language, you're going to have an understanding of, are you using any specific instruction sets that are x86-64? So you'd have to be doing something quite unique in that instance. So using AC3, for example, on the x86-64 processor. Otherwise, if you're using C++ or Golang and you're just compiling regular stuff, you should be all right to just be able to either cross-compile or compile on, if you want to be able to do it in your in a lab environment and not have an EC2 instance, you can just use a Raspberry Pi. That's the same architecture underneath. Or if you're lucky enough to be blessed with an M1 from Apple, that is also the same architecture. In terms of price performance, I haven't. I wrote a blog post that talked about some numbers, and there's been several other people. One particular one that of interest was from honeycomb.io, where they did quite an extensive amount of research. And for the most part, I found that we were hitting, it was getting pretty close to the numbers that AWS quoted, which is a 40% price performance increase. So not a 40% performance increase outright, but a 40% price performance increase. So the price goes down and performance goes up, with 40% in total. So if you wait for the Graviton 3 as well, there's also some more improvements that are coming. But the most interesting thing that I think to take away from it is that it's better for the environment, right? it's a smaller footprint. It uses less heat. It uses less energy for a similar, if not better, performance than Intel. And that's been, Apple's been touting that for their M1. So that's really an interesting thing. I think it means that, hopefully if a lot more things move to ARM, then data center sizes and cooling requirements will go down. And that's only a good thing because we'll probably be increasing our, compute usage over the years, but hopefully we'll be able to maintain the size of data centers and energy requirements. Hopefully that answers your question, Wing.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Cool.
I'll just quickly mention what Greg just now mentioned on the environmental footprint. I happened just did a customer presentation just before this earlier today, and specifically, actually, a customer brought up the topic of environmental friendliness of a cloud environment, and we had a very good discussion, specifically on the data centers, the cloud data centers, right? AWS data centers and other data centers, how the modern technologies are being used to drive down the air conditioning costs and other costs. Yeah, it's very sort of like a timing as of like I'm hearing on the same day, right? All these things are more and more focused on many organizations and businesses. They have their boxes to tick per se, but there is the genuine consideration to many and more customers and organizations to think about the environmental benefits to try to reduce the impacts, I guess.
Cool, thanks, Simon. So Stephen, maybe a question for you. So is CDK v2 available now, or is it still in a beta preview state?
Yep, so CDK v2 is generally available. AWS have moved it out of their developer preview or release candidate state. So that means you'll be able to use it in future projects, I guess without running into API changes, as long as you're on the v2 version. AWS did say that they won't make any API changes up until the next major release, which is v3. So for a very long time, we should be able to expect to be able to make our CDK code bases without having to worry about any sort of incompatibilities.
Yay. So how many code bases have you changed so far, Stephen?
Oh, so I'm actually running on CDK v2 for a few of the code bases I'm working on at the moment. And even in the, I guess, release candidates or the latest release candidate I used, there was very minimal changes I had to make between v1 and v2, as long as you're in a pretty recent version and not something that's like 2 years old.
Okay, cool. And CDK constructs, now that there's a kind of more official hub for those, have you used anything from the hub yet, or are you still writing your own constructs?
So at the moment, still writing my own constructs. In terms of the hub, I haven't actually downloaded anything from there, but I did have a look around and see what was available, and there was a lot of things that are interesting. It just hasn't met my specific use cases yet. Although definitely, if there's anything in there that I need to use, I will be using them. Although bearing in mind that the developer does have to release it in your specific language as well. So TypeScript is the default language that you submit. Mm-hmm. And it is up to the developer to convert it to other languages through JSII. So if they feel like they want to support Python, not Java, for example, then there will be a Python version, but you may not be able to access it using Java. Although I guess because it's open source, you're more than welcome to go ahead and compile it using JSII to a Java format.
Okay, cool. And have you submitted anything to the hub yet?
Most of my constructs are in Python, so they're not compatible, but I guess I'll have to convert them to TypeScript eventually.
All right, good stuff. Good stuff. Thanks, Stephen. Any questions from the floor? No? Okay. Simon, tell me a little bit more. What was the big thing for you in this enterprise data protection space that you were talking to us about? What was the most interesting thing that's kind of gonna help tip that big government agency over to move to AWS?
Well, to me, I mean, personally, I feel it's the dynamics that you would be able to do that you could never do in the past in a traditional non-cloud environment, right? So that's echoing probably a few other similar comments people made over years, but in the enterprise data protection space, it's this again. It's the idea of using these analytics and machine learning technologies that you can do things in real time. You can model and you can use some algorithms to quickly detect and report on the misbehaviors when it is happening, when it's underway. So in the past, all these like data protection things, or like you react to accidents, right? And then you try to fix them later, you try to ensure it's not happening anymore. But now you suddenly have, or you will have more and more power in stopping it right away, right? So that's to me very exciting. It's talking about like yes, you will be always subject to any system, will be always subject to attacks, vulnerabilities, and vice versa. It's like whether it's human-based, whether it is like a automated, whatever, right? So there are so many different, I guess, methods that people could use try to get into something that they should not, right? Or they should not get information from. But the idea of being able to dynamically stop them in the middle and to be able to actually ping pong the source without, like in the past, you may be able to detect something that is not quite correct. But then you have to, for example, issue a blanket statement or policy saying, okay, I'll just take something offline for now, right? So that will stop it. But then that is very disruptive. And now with all the intelligences, with all the analytics, you can quickly pinpoint the source. You can actually nip that in the bud, and without affecting the normal performance, the normal operations, or normal serviceability, I would say. Yep. So I think that's quite exciting and that's quite revolutionary, actually.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Simon, for that. All right. Last call for questions. Otherwise, we will wrap up. Okay. Geethika, do we look forward to a meetup in January, or is it the meetup taking a break? You want to give us an update?
No. Yep. So we usually don't have one in January because everybody is away in January. So the next meetup we are planning is first Thursday of February. Then depending on COVID situation, of course, but hopefully we can do it the usual way, physical interactions, and yep, looking forward to that.
Where will that be? Is that in the AWS offices or?
Our usual place is Grid, Auckland, but then we have to work with them to see whether with the COVID situation, whether they still allow events there, or if not, we can find some of our clients or even AWS space. Yeah. So watch that space. Okay.
All right, cool. So if you haven't signed up on meetup.com for the Auckland user group meetup, and we'll keep you posted. All right. Well, thanks, Stephen, Simon, and Geethika for your contributions today. It was awesome to hear about some of the things from reInvent. That's it. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good evening.